Welcome to the first Scrutiny Board for Environment, Housing and Communities of the 2023-24 municipal year. This is just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and is webcast. So please be aware of that. And if you do wish to view the meeting afterwards, there is a link on the agenda page on the council's website. As we are at the beginning of a municipal year, the membership of the Scrutiny Board has been significantly refreshed. So, for instance, I am a new chair, but we also have new Scrutiny Board members, and I think it would be pertinent for our guests, as well as for members present, to have an introduction session where we can go around, say who we are, which ward we represent, but also a little bit of our background that's brought us to the table in terms of being councillors. So I shall start. I'm Stuart Galton. I'm councillor for Rothwell. I've been a councillor on Leeds City Council for 25 years. And my background is nothing to do with the subject matter of this Scrutiny Board. I was in utilities, I was in leisure, but most recently, of course, I have been a full-time councillor. Just to introduce our Scrutiny Board team, we have Becky Atherton and we have Debbie Oldham, who will be looking after us during the meeting. Councillor Pauline Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward. I'm a long-standing member of this Scrutiny Board, working with the ex-chair, Councillor Barry Anderson. And I did say previously, Councillor Galton, you have a very hard act to follow with Barry Anderson. I've experience of being Scrutiny Chair for over 12 years. So I know Scrutiny and I like this board very much, and it's a very good board and we've delivered a lot from it. So I hope we continue to do so with you as Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Andy Rontry, newly elected for Kirkstall. Prior to being elected onto the council, I'd worked with for a number of community groups in the Kirkstall area, and before that, spent over 20 years in the IT department of a branch of HSBC within the city. And I'm looking forward to working with you all and serving on this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abdul Hanan, Headingley and High Park. My background has been youth and community work for the last 35 years. Really passionate about community work, especially the community that I'm representing in Headingley High Park around environmental issues and housing. I'm really keen to see how we can work as a group to ensure that the ward gets the best out of the council. And I'm looking forward to working with colleagues.
Good morning, folks. I'm Adrian McCluskey, councillor for Farnley and Wortley. I'm originally from Belfast, as you can probably tell. A mental health nurse for 36 years, working in NHS mental health services around the country. Came to Leeds in 1990, developed a specialist nurse, and then went into management. And retired in 2019, started being asked to deliver leaflets, then knock on doors. Next thing I know, I'm the candidate. So, yeah. Thank you. Looking forward to working with this board.
Good morning, all. I'm Councillor Jim McKenna, and I'm in my 36th year as a councillor. Where does the time go? I have sat on Scrutiny for most of my time, and in fact, at one time, I actually chaired 3 council Scrutiny committees at the same time after we had a resignation. Yes, 3 at the same time. That's some time ago, but I have to say I'm mainly involved myself in the area of planning and development, and I currently chair City Plans Panel, which regrettably meets on a Thursday, the same as this panel. So I'm afraid I probably will have to come off after today, but I'll be here. I didn't want to let anybody down, but after this one, I'll probably have to move to another scrutiny board, which is a great shame because I'm very interested in the housing and the environment and the communities. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Annie Maloney. I represent Beeston and Holbeck Ward. I was elected last year and was on this board last year, and I have to say it was one of my favourite boards to be on, so I hope all the new members that have joined thoroughly enjoy it, just like I have. So yeah, to please be on it again to talk more about bins and void properties, because that's all I did last year.
Siri?
Sorry, morning all. Councillor Simon Seary, elected in 2018 for the Pudsey Ward, representing Pudsey, Swinner and Tysel. I currently work full time as well as a retail manager. So my dedication is just to represent the residents of my ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Penny Stables, newly elected to Wetherby Ward. I'm a Green councillor, first Green councillor in the north of Leeds. My background is a bit of hospitality and then business, sales and marketing. And I'm now a nutritional therapist. For the last 4 years, I've been running a community green group, looking at all sorts of projects. So I'm very involved in the environment, and that's me.
Councillor Norma Harrington from Wetherby Ward, was elected at the same time as Councillor Seary in 2018, and I'm also community chair for Outer North East Community Committee. Previous to being a councillor, I was on Wetherby Town Councillor, was mayor for 2 years, and prior to that I was a prison governor after 23 years in the prison service. So quite a broad range. Thank you.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Wharfdale Ward. I've been on council since 1999. And as far as this scrutiny board is concerned, what I would say is this is the scrutiny board to be on, because your majority of your complaints that you'll get are covered at somewhere or another on this particular one, with the possible exception of potholes. Everything else that you'll cover, and they really do get into the nitty-gritty of the things that affect our residents on the ground, whether it be community safety, whether it be benefits. It really is the board to be on.
Thank you, members. I am very aware that I will be requiring a lot of support as we go forward during the year as a new chair, and I'm very what's the word? I am very, I'm trying to think of a nicer word than chuffed. I am chuffed that we've got such a really wide skill set on this board, because it does cover such a wide range of subject matters. And I think everybody has a skill that they can bring to scrutinising and making sure that the council delivers on all of the areas that it wants to under this jurisdiction. So I hope it doesn't intimidate too much our guests today, the amount of the wealth of experience that there is on the board so far. But we are going to go straight into the agenda, because the team is very keen to talk to you about the reports that you're bringing. So we'll start with the first 5 agenda items, and I look to my left to Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against refusal inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there are no light items of business. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests?
It'd be very unusual if we didn't have interest in these subject areas. It's, as Barry said, it's mainly our casework, but apart from that, I have no interest.
Nothing pecuniary? No.
Thank you. I'll take that as there are no interests. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillor Akhtar and also from Councillor Harland. And we also have some apologies from the Chief Officer of Housing, Gerard Tinsdale, today. And we have been advised that Councillor Cooper will be attending this meeting at around 11:15ish. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. We'll go on to item 6 now, which is minutes. Becky.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just ask members to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of March and just draw your attention to 2 matters arising. Minute 71, to just note that the approved end of year statement is now on the published committee webpage. The annual report for 22-23 will also be published on that page following consideration by council on the 12th of July. Minute 72, to just note that the response to the 22-23 Scrutiny Board's recommendations regarding reducing gambling harm were considered by the Executive Board yesterday afternoon. The Executive Board was very supportive of the recommendations made by the board, and I've circulated a link to the meeting should anyone want to watch the discussion directly. Thank you, Chair.
On that last subject point, I did clarify whether or not the Scrutiny Board Chair should attend when a Scrutiny Board report is looked at by the Executive Board, but I understand that the rules changed to what they had been originally, because I would have thought it would have been more appropriate for Councillor Anderson to report back on that than for me, who participated very little in it. All I will say is I did watch the Executive Board report, and people were very, very positive about the work that had been done by the board and the leadership that Councillor Anderson had shown in getting some significant recommendations put forward, which are now council policy. So in terms of the minutes themselves, they need to be proposed and seconded by somebody who was part of last year's Scrutiny Board. Do we have any? Councillor Anderson can propose. Are you going to second, Councillor Graham? Very good, thank you. Much appreciated. Right, we'll go on to item 7 now, which is the terms of reference.
This report sets out the terms of reference for the board as agreed by the council at this year's AGM on the 24th of May. If I can draw members' attention to page 13, which provides the general terms of reference applicable to all scrutiny boards. Pages 15 to 20, which is Appendix 2 and sets out Article 6 of the Constitution. Just for awareness, legal colleagues are still updating Article 6, so it's not entirely in line with what was agreed yet at the AGM, but it soon will be, and I will circulate an updated version once that's the case. Appendix 3 on pages 21 to 28 is probably most useful for members of this board in terms of setting out the delegations that fall within the remit of EHC. If I can just flag, sorry, that the main changes for this particular scrutiny board are now that Councillor Lennox is the Executive Board member for housing, and functions including the delivery of locality youth services now fall within the remit of this board, although if members could note the remaining aspects of youth services remain with children and families. Thank you.
I assume members are familiar with the subject matter in that item and there are no questions. Okay, thank you. Item 8, co-opted members.
This report is a standard report that comes to the Scrutiny Board every year in June. It highlights the provision for all Scrutiny Boards to be able to co-opt members on a permanent basis. The report sets out both the general provisions and those that are specific to some of the boards. There is no legislative requirement for this board to permanently co-opt members. Typically, the board has determined not to do so due to the breadth of subjects that fall within the remit, and instead have invited external witnesses for specific items of business. It would be my recommendation that the board maintains this approach until or unless members reach a point where they determine co-option would add specific value.
Can I just confirm that members are comfortable with that approach that's suggested? Great, thank you. On to the subject matter of the meeting and the performance report. This is a very substantial document and we are going to be going through it sequentially with each indicator in time. I think it would be useful if our guests could introduce themselves for the benefit of the board, but also for any members of the public watching on the broadcast. Can I start with you, Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Money, Chief Officer in the Council's Safer, Stronger Communities team. And for new members, in summary, that team is essentially there to support the political infrastructure, in particular the work that is done through the community committees. We work on supporting stronger communities in a number of different ways, and the safer element of the work that my team does concerns the community safety agenda. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, apologies. It's the first time I've attended. My name is Kevin Brighton. I'm the Development Improvement Manager for Safer Stronger Communities team. My role is to look for obviously gaps where we need to improve our services and also support the area managers within the LASBAT teams, as well as our colleagues in the neighbourhood policing teams as well.
Good morning. My name is John Woolner. I'm the Chief Officer for Environmental Services. That covers a range of services, including the bins, cleaner neighbourhoods team, city centre team, household waste sites, and the various recycling, non-curbside recycling we offer across the city, and all the various contracts that underpin all that.
Morning, I'm James Rogers, Director of Communities, Housing and Environment.
Morning, I'm Lee Hemsworth, Chief Officer for Community Hubs, Welfare and Business Support. So I look after all of our community hubs and libraries and our welfare and benefits services primarily.
Hi, I'm Mandy Sawyer, Head of Housing and Neighbourhood Services in Housing Leeds. Overseeing some of our citywide tenancy management services, including housing strategy and policy, but also with responsibility for tenancy management covering the west and the northeast of the city.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Rob Gore. I'm the Deputy Head of Property Management within Housing Leeds. My role covers the repair and maintenance of council homes, including compliance, empty homes, and other aspects such as servicing and inspection. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name's Ian Strickland. I'm a Business Development Manager. I work in Community Hubs, Welfare and Business Support. Part of my role is supporting and developing performance management arrangements within the Directorate.
Good morning, Emma Camillo Price, Intelligence and Policy Service. I work in the team that deals with corporate level performance reporting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed Rafiq. I'm the Exec Board Member for Climate, Energy, Environment and Green Space. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Jess Lennox. I'm the new Exec Board Member for Housing in the City.
Many thanks for those introductions. Can I please invite Mr. Strickland to talk about how the performance report has been put together for us?
Thank you, Chair. So in line with the budget and policy framework, performance is reported twice a year to the Scrutiny Board. And this report is a follow-up to the one that was presented to the board in January. So that tended to cover in the main half-yearly updates for 22-23. So for the selection of KPIs that have been included in this report, it's the position recorded as at the end of the last financial year, so as at the end of March 2023. I say selection of KPIs because in preparation for the January update, we worked closely with Councillor Anderson in identifying a number of priority areas across a number of services, which the scrutiny were particularly interested in. So just to confirm, not all performance areas are included, but they would be available if any members would want to request those. There was some feedback from January's meeting, and that was asking for information around rough sleeping and also some proposals around how we manage our waste, and they've been included in the report. All of the information included is aligned to our best city ambitions, and we've included at the beginning of the report a short summary as to the current position regarding the performance management framework for the best city ambition. So if anybody has any further questions on that, my colleague Emma can provide the latest updates. So in introduction, that's pretty much it, Chair. Happy to receive any feedback and provide any information as we go along.
Thanks very much. I know that the members are very keen to get into the subject matter, but I did want to offer, if needed, any introductory remarks from any of our executive members or the director.
No introductory remarks, but I'm happy to, we're happy to come back afterwards. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Yeah, same with me. Look forward to working with the board chair, and as always, we take on board the work, take on board the considerations of any recommendations made by the board. So look forward to the year ahead and your chairmanship.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Nothing much to add to what Ian's already said. There's a lot in this report. I think it's important that members focus on the areas that they've got particular interest in. So happy for members to sort of probe particular areas, and we'll deal with particular issues and questions as they arise, if that's okay.
Thanks very much. Well, we'll start off with the first indicators. If you have a look at your agenda, those are associated with housing. Do we have any members who have any questions on rent collections and arrears or void prop? Councillor Anderson.
Quickly. Have you got any idea yet how much you might have to write off? I accept you've got arrears, fine. That's just a matter of normal business. You end up with arrears. Are you going to have to write off more money this year as a result of the financial difficulties? Because effectively that means that the HRA takes a hit, which is the people who are paying are having to take a disproportionate hit because they're actually making the payment. So are you having to write it off more or not?
We have due process that we follow in terms of a rent arrears process. We do not write off current tenant arrears. They would continue to sit on account, and we would continue to work with the resident to recover those. With the exception of debt, where there's a debt recovery order and a legislative responsibility for us to write off those arrears. In terms of former tenant arrears, we again have a process that we follow, and we are really successful in what we do recover. And as highlighted in the report on the second indicator, we recovered almost 800,000 in rent arrears and wrote off 1.09 million. We tend to write off around 1.2 million each year. At this point, we're not anticipating that we would increase that write-off, but obviously we continue to review that on a regular basis, and the budget, the bad debt provision within the budget will be adjusted to reflect that.
Thank you. Any questions on void properties? Councillor Stables, and then we'll have Councillor Maloney.
I just had a query as to when properties are empty, whether we are insulating them.
Thank you, Councillor. Not routinely, no. That's work that we'd carry out through the planned investment programme. The only time that we'd insulate a void is if we had to do isolated repairs where the amount of work was that extensive that we'd have to do that to meet the current building regulations. So, for example, if we hacked off large areas of plaster, then we'd be obliged in certain property types to insulate.
Just looking at the voids, it's good to see that they're going down, not as quickly as we might like, but they are going down. What's the current turnaround? So when a house declares a void property, how many sort of days, months are we looking at for it to then be suitable for a tenant to be moved into it?
Thank you. So the average relet times are currently 116 days, which are down from 141 days in March. So that average has continued to fall since this report. If I can just add, just in terms of numbers, also that you know that the numbers continue to fall, albeit not at the rate I acknowledged. But I can update that since this report that we've hit 800 voids now, so numbers have fallen another good 100 since then.
Thanks. Can I ask a further question? I did note in the report on page 39 that the performance on voids seems to be improving in the south of the city, but seems to be worsening in the west of the city. Is anything being done to understand why that might be?
Thank you, Councillor. Performance is now improving in all areas of the city. We do have action plans in place and targets with all our providers to drive forward. So we have seen improvements in all areas, but in the west of the city also.
Thank you for that. On to average relet times, claims for disrepair, gas safety inspections, housing adaptations, annual tenancy check-ins. I did have a query of my own on that one, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me. They're called annual tenancy check-ins, but I understand that the target is for them to be achieved triennially. That doesn't seem to sort of match.
Yes, you're right, Councillor Galton. I think because we've traditionally called them the annual tenancy visits, check-ins, I think we've kept that language because everybody knows what that is. But absolutely right, we are for most tenants doing them every 3 years. We probably do need to look at what they're called and what we brand them as, but we just need to make sure that they don't then become confused with other general visits. So yeah, it's something for us to look at and we can take that away.
Councillor Anderson?
One of the issues I have with not doing more on an annual basis is how do you give people advice on how to use their heating properly? Because we have spent a lot of money, particularly in my area this year, in terms of putting insulation and ground source heat pumps. Now, when that was installed, a lot of that was good weather. And so how can we be sure that they are using their heating correctly to maximize the benefits if we're only seeing them every 2 or 3 years? Because it could be that you're missing out on some tenants who would actually benefit from more regular advice.
Thank you, Councillor. As part of the proactive work that we're doing around damp and mould, and I guess we'll call it preparedness for the winter, and this is something that we're currently working on, our engagement and communication strategy, and how we push that information out to tenants, and absolutely taking the point that there's a lot of different systems out there. It's a good time to get information out, and particularly before the winter.
Thank you. Let's move on to homelessness prevention. Do we have any questions in that area from members? Councillor Anderson.
Kerry, I saw Kerry. She's sitting at the desk now, is she? She is aware of my interest in this particular, the homelessness thing. We've got a report coming to exec board in July, as far as I'm aware. Is that going to come to this scrutiny board for a pre-inquiry, or is it just going straight to, or is one of the recommendations in the report to exec board going to be that it comes here?
I think that's a good question, Councillor Anderson. As far as I'm aware, the report is currently proposed to go to executive board, not to scrutiny board prior. If scrutiny board would like to receive that report after it's been to executive board and therefore contribute to its further development, then more than happy to include that within the report and bring it here.
Thanks for clarification. Reducing rough sleeping. Housing customer complaints. welfare rights, housing benefit caseload. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. I did have occasion to call at an old chappie who lives in my ward, 66 years old and disabled. And he had been placed in this accommodation, I believe, by the council. It was like a bed sit, and it was, quite frankly, it was a hovel. And clearly now I'm working to get this chappie out. But at the moment, he complained incessantly about his landlord at first. And I did tell him that, well, the way it's going at the moment, if you complain about your landlord, he'll serve a Section 106 on you, no fault evictions. And I said, well, you still should do it. And the council will sort you out. But I found out that this chappie was required to pay, and it was being paid by the council on the housing benefit, £120 per week, which is £480 plus a month. And I just wonder, my question behind all this is, do we ever check where we're putting people into accommodation? We do have what we regard on the housing as a decency standards, where we're trying to bring all our tenants up to live in accommodation that's fit for purpose and a decency standard. Believe me, this wasn't. If anybody doubts this, I'm happy to go visit this chappie with you, with one of you, and show you for yourself. It just seems to me if we're not doing that, we really, really should, Chair, be doing that.
Can I just come in on that, Chair, just to respond? Very difficult to get into the specific case without seeing the details. I think in general, I think if we've placed somebody in accommodation, clearly we would do the necessary checks in terms of suitability and such, but clearly I don't know the case and the individual and how they got into the accommodation that they're in. If the resident and yourself do have concerns about the conditions, we do have our private sector team who could have a look at the case and see if there's anything that they can do, although our powers are often limited in this particular area, as you know, other than where we've got selective licensing in place, but we can certainly look at that. And I don't know if, Lee, you want to make any comment in terms of the housing benefit aspect?
Yeah, we wouldn't generally visit properties from a housing benefit unless they're supported accommodation. So unless there's an element to which there's additional support provided to the tenant, and we would work with housing to do that visit. But we wouldn't just from a straight housing benefit perspective visit the property.
Councillor Lennox.
Just to quickly reiterate what James says, that we do have things that we can do in terms of inspecting or visiting private rented sector. So Jim, if you wanted to contact, for support with helping your resident, please do. And Mark Island's team can look into it. But just to reiterate that we do obviously check up on the standard of where people are living, whether it's private rented or ourselves as a landlord. Obviously, we have our own processes there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lennox.
Chair, can I just come in? If you do raise it, Councillor McKenna, if you copy me in as well, we can always do a benefit check to make sure that they're getting the most.
Can you give me your name again?
Lee Hemsworth.
Hemsworth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We had a little bit of activity because we wanted to bring back in our housing officer, Robert Gore, because there were a couple of items that we'd managed to miss. And Councillor Graham wishes to have a question about complaints.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry you moved on quickly. I think it would come under this. It's regarding when residents have applied to have their priority. We've put it forward, dealing with the housing management at Swarcliffe, who were very good, Beth there, and where they've been then referred to housing options, I think it is, to be assessed or other issues. And to get a response back from housing options over the past few months has been absolutely, I'm going to say, appalling. We've had to chase it up and we've had no response whatsoever. So what is happening between the housing office and housing options where they just are ignoring the fact that we need for them to intervene in something and come back. And I'm sure that's not just happening in Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
I am aware that there are some delays. I'm not sure how long that backlog is. I understood that quite a lot of work had been done to reduce that backlog very recently, but in terms of how long that is at the currently, I'm not sure. I don't have that information, but certainly I can find out and I can let you know.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Briefly, on a similar related point, the government introduced standards that we're going to have to adopt for our own social tenants in terms of the way we consult with them, what we can do for them. What impact is that going to have on the private rented sector, which was where Councillor McKenna's issue was coming away? Are the government pushing it in the private rented sector, or is it just the social rented sector that they're trying to introduce these reforms?
I'm not aware of any specific government action in terms of the private rented sector which would sort of align with what they're doing in terms of social council housing.
I'm very glad that Councillor Anderson's raised that point, though, because I think it's an area that I think it's worth the board having some information on in terms of the new reporting requirements that have been introduced for us as a social housing provider by the government. And there's going to be a regulator of social housing, isn't there? So are our indicators going to change in the future?
Yes, as you're aware, the social housing regulator is in the process of introducing a new regulatory framework linked to the bill that's going through Parliament currently. That will introduce a series of tenant satisfaction measures. Some of those will be perception measures. So we have began undertaking surveys of customers in terms of tenant satisfaction, overall satisfaction with different services. So we are in a position to report those indicators from April 2023. Alongside that, there are some additional indicators which are still measures of customer satisfaction, but they're about service delivery. So are we delivering repairs on time, that kind of thing. And equally, those measures are being pulled together and will be reportable from April this year. So certainly we will be able to report those into the Scrutiny Board moving forward.
And can you clarify, because I know that the council has made a commitment to having an impact on the issue of damp and mould in properties, whether those indicators also include performance in that area as well?
Thank you, Chair. The indicators don't specifically target damp and mould improvements, but I guess if we look at them individually, particularly around the complaint handling indicator and around getting repairs done in target, then those drive positive behaviours in that area. We anticipate we will see new legislation linked to Awab's law sometime in the near future, and we expect that to reinforce the standards that landlords have to work to, specifically in terms of damp and mould.
And can we expect to see the first of those that data in a later date on this board?
That's the intention, Chair, yes.
Sorry, so to move on again, back into our benefit section. I think we were on item indicator 12, which was housing benefit caseload. Oh, by the way, sorry, Robert, you can go now. Because we brought you back in. I appreciate you coming back for a second go. So, council tax support. Any questions, members? Local welfare support scheme. Yes, Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair.
I'd just like a bit of clarification here, because I'm not sure if I've understood this correctly. I spotted the figure 42,823 in the second paragraph, referring to the number of working age households receiving council tax support. It then appears again in the 5th paragraph and as a reference to working age claimants. Now, I would guess that this is the same, that it's actually the same figure, and either the reference to households or to claimants should be changed. Could anybody help me out here, please?
Yeah, it is the same figure. It's just the terminology used. So we'll just household, because you claim by household. It's just we've just mixed that up, but it is the same number.
Oh, I lost my two localized schemes. These are two schemes that are sort of run and defined locally then for working age claimants, and that's distinct from the sort of nationally defined scheme for pensionable people of pensionable age. So we say two schemes, they run in parallel, and it's different criteria for different people, presumably according to the level of income. Am I understanding this correctly?
No, the eligibility is still the same. We have two schemes. We have a general scheme that was introduced when we were asked to introduce our own scheme back in, and then when universal credit came in, we introduced a universal credit scheme. So ultimately, all working age claimants will be on the universal credit scheme, but there are protections. It was the council agreed when we introduced the universal credit scheme that for those people on the general scheme, the protections would stay in place until they moved onto universal credit. And then at that point, they would go onto the universal credit scheme and their protections would be removed. So it was just a simpler way of doing it. And actually we get highlighted as best practice for that because it's an easier way to administer it. But the eligibility is the same across the two.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Rowntree. Moving along, we have local welfare support scheme. Any questions on that indicator? Customer contact in community hubs. If no one else has a question, I do. I notice on page 49 that there is a table of all the different community hubs and the amount of contacts that they've had. And I know how important it is, for instance, in the cost of living crisis, for people to be able to get money advice in community hubs. But I notice that there seems to be a 0 mark next to the Seacroft community hub, which is a surprise. Do we have an explanation for that?
That actually, it shouldn't be on there because that's South Seacroft one-stop centre that isn't currently open. No, not at the moment, no.
Okay. Next indicator is new people registered with the job shop. Yes, Councillor McCluskey.
Can I just refer back to the community hubs and the contacts? And I don't see Farnley and Wortley there. Is there a reason?
There currently isn't a community hub within that ward, so that's covered by the mobile hub, which is on the list in terms of contact. I know we've got a meeting in the diary to talk about that.
Thank you.
Well spotted. So we move on from registrations for job shop into indicator 17, which is antisocial behaviour. Do we have any questions in this area from members? No. What I will say is in the community safety subject areas, we're very grateful that the extra information and data that was requested at the chair's brief has been included in the report, and I think it's very helpful. So thank you for that. Going into hate crime at 18, do we have any questions from members at this point? One of the things I was hoping to clarify was the differentiation in hate crime, because obviously there are lots of protected characteristics. Have you seen any particular rise in any particular characteristic, please?
Chair, if I can come in at that point, you can see what the general statistical trend has been, which is generally speaking pretty flat there year on year. That's not to say that within each of the protected characteristics that's what we've seen. Some have reduced. The most significant increase we've seen is in relation to disability hate. And we think that links to some work we've been doing for, well, actually for a couple of years now, with a number of organisations and with communities, but I think most significantly with the United Response, to look to address an issue that we could see in terms of significant underreporting. We felt the figures were so low that there may be some concerns with individuals reporting disability crime. As a consequence of that, we have seen a fairly significant increase in incidents being reported to us, which we're obviously pleased about. I think the general sense is that there's probably significant underreporting across all strands of hate. So we look constantly at that statistic. So whether the statistics are going up or going down, key thing for us is people having confidence to report it so that we can put a range of support, a suite of support in to support people experiencing hate.
Councillor Stables.
Just following up on that, can I just ask? Just following up on that, can I just ask, when you have improved, done work on improving accessibility, have you found in a particular area, have you found that has triggered an increase in hate crime around disability? The reason I ask that is that we are specifically looking at trying to improve the accessibility in the Wetherby ward.
I think in general terms, we have found that where we focused specifically, we're doing quite a lot of work as well on signposting centres and reporting centres. So in general terms, yes, we have seen that correlation.
And how do we address that? Have you got any suggestions or support?
Good morning, Councillor. We do work with United Response, and in some of the areas where we identify we've got an increase in hate crime, especially around disability, we work with our hate crime coordinators in West Yorkshire Police. There is a pathway that we're looking at, trauma-informed care. We make sure that they have the support, that they understand that they don't have to come forward, but we can put that mechanism in place for them. Sometimes it's really difficult for people with disabilities to make a stand. So we make sure they've got enough support so they can do. And there is a package together that we've developed. There's a training package that's linked into that. So new officers get trained with it as well. And then our LASBAT teams and our neighbourhood policing teams respond to those calls and that rise in service.
More money?
Yeah, just to add to that, members might be aware of some developments nationally in terms of increasing police officers, and obviously Leeds district will benefit from that and is benefiting from that over time. The police, in terms of their role, working with us very closely on the Safe Leeds executive, recognise the significance of hate crime, and I'm pleased to say that the police are looking to increase their number of hate crime coordinators, the resource that Kevin's just referred to there, to provide that additional support to people who are suffering from hate crime. That's quite a protracted process in terms of those officers coming online, but I think that's a really significant development and really welcomed by us.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late this morning. I had a ward meeting to attend before I came in this morning. I just wanted to offer some help and support to Councillor Staples, the new councillor in Wetherby, that if she'd like some more information, help and support on that particular issue that may come up in Wetherby, I'm more than happy to be in contact with her around that and arrange a briefing with Safer Leeds and police to help her get to grips with it.
Thank you.
Gratefully received. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Paul, you mentioned earlier work that you've done around cohesion in the Safer Leeds partnership, which is that with the aim of hoping to improve such hate crime statistics?
Yeah, thanks for referencing that, Chair. There's probably a number of pieces of work ongoing across the city that that will hopefully help with this particular issue. But the work that you just alluded to there, Chair, in terms of cohesion, I think significantly links to addressing a number of issues, but not least the issue we have where communities may not be getting on with each other as well as we would like. There is a really significant piece of work taking place at the moment where we are looking to baseline through some really extensive community engagement and some survey work and some focus groups to establish what that baseline is in the city. The last time that this was looked at was a number of years ago, so we think now is the time to revisit this. Coming off that baseline data, which we will have assessed and accredited through a link that we've got with an academic institution, I think a number of actions will spin off that, and a number of those actions may be of interest to this scrutiny board moving forwards.
Councillor Siri.
Thank you. Just a quick one on antisocial behaviour. We've seen a massive increase in stolen motorbikes across the city, and we're aware of what the issues it brings to antisocial behaviour in parks and green spaces. I just wondered if we knew what the police were doing to try and resolve this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Siri. I guess in terms of significant antisocial behaviour playing out across the city, the issue that you've alluded to, not so much necessarily the theft of the vehicles, because that's picked up as well, but the subsequent antisocial use of those vehicles on our roads and in our green spaces is probably one of, if not the most significant antisocial behaviour issue that we in Leeds are looking to respond to with our colleagues in the police, and that very much mirrors the kind of national picture. Members may be aware of an incident not many days ago involving an incident in the Manchester area. This is a particularly difficult and challenging issue to respond to, at least in terms of when those incidents are taking place, because there's obviously a significant safety issue associated with, if we're honest, often young people who are making poor lifestyle choices and riding such vehicles in antisocial behaviour, and then of course other residents and road users and people using our green spaces as well. So there is a significant work stream in development. It's been in development for a while in terms of responding to this particular issue. I suppose the most significant emerging tactical response within a suite of responses is the development of a citywide PSPO, which will give the police and council resources some additional civil powers to assist with the existing criminal and antisocial behaviour legislation, so that we've got a full suite of tactical options to deal with this. It's a very tricky issue, but one we're really focused on, and we recognise the significant problems it causes in pretty much all of your communities.
Paul, would you mind expanding on that in terms of whether the review will cover whether the resource in the PSPO could be expanded, and whether that might be enabled through council resource as well as the police?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just pick up on that if I can, because I'm developing some work already in relation to the public space protection order. we should be ready to go by the 3rd of July. We're going to marry it up with the ASB Awareness Week. It's going to be one of our themed days within ASB Awareness Week. I'm also working with our colleagues in Parks and Countryside, looking at a park strategy around about how we can dissuade. You'll be aware of some of the Safer Street funding that we've already got, that we're looking at Middleton Park as a pilot scheme, target hardening. We've got a fantastic charity in Kentmere that are offering diversionary tactics to young people that are involved in this antisocial behaviour, and that's going really, really well. We've also been asked to lead on the West Yorkshire wide media campaign for off-road motorcycle misuse, which again I'm going to launch on the 3rd of July, so it all comes out at one time. So the message is going to be really, really clear to young people that there's a line in the sand being drawn. The campaign's called Enough is Enough, and I think that's what we need to stand by. And then there's the last little bit that comes out of this is working with West Yorkshire Police operations with them. Tactically, I don't want to obviously disclose any tactics, but what I can say is that there is funding being made available through that Safer Streets Fund for extra resources to come away from West Yorkshire Police's resources, not only from Leeds, but from their ops support team as well. And they have really good tactical capabilities. I can give you some rundown very briefly, but we are recovering stolen motorcycles at premises when we've done warrants. We are actually challenging people who are doing it and taking the vehicles off them using Section 59 Police Reform Act. We've been really, really positive. Leeds have been seen now as pretty much the gold standard now as we're moving forward across all the 5 districts, and they're coming to us for that support and advice. So I'm really positive about where we're going with this, and hopefully, you know, this will develop into a when I say Mr. Money talks about a suite of tactics and they're all sat in front of us. This is just one, and it will eventually expire, but we're hoping to set that line in the stand, engage, educate, and then enforce if we have to do.
Well, that sounds very encouraging. Councillor Stables.
Sorry, it's just a quick follow-up in terms of safety, because we will have all seen that a number of those young people who are causing this antisocial behaviour aren't wearing helmets, which is a real concern. And particularly on some of them, of course, it's illegal activity. But if it's electric bikes, it's not compulsory currently to wear a helmet. Is this something that Leeds City Council would have any civil powers, or the police would have any civil powers to influence in any way?
The electric assisted pedal cycles are our new emerging trend. I've looked at the legislation inside out, because that's what I do when I find something coming along. It's all down to actually the kilowatt output and the speed that they go, depending on what you have to do. Most, I would say, the majority of electric pedal cycles, other than those that go less than 8 miles an hour and less than 11 kilowatts, have to have a license, have to have insurance, and have to have an MOT. So therefore, they fall straight in the remit of the Road Traffic Act, and also Section 59 of the Public Order Act, Section 59 Police Reform Act, where officers could seize these vehicles. And it is around, that act was actually put together around about safety. It was about educating people about riding off-road and riding motorcycles. And luckily, we've got that input now with the dedicated sergeant in West Yorkshire Police in Leeds, that we are the only one to have that's looking at those problems. And I'm linking in with the Motorcycle Action Group as well, because they want to get on board with us. I'm hoping to get some funding for a video from them so that we can show young people in schools, you know, how you should ride properly, and what's going to happen, the consequences. And sometimes the consequences of being injured doesn't frighten young people because they don't take that in. So it's around about consequences about not getting a driving license, getting a conviction and not being able to go abroad. Those are sometimes that people need to be told about. So that's some of the forward planning.
Particularly around helmets, though, is there anything that you can answer about that?
Legislation is quite clear about how you must wear helmets when riding a mechanically propelled vehicle. So that's in the remit of our colleagues in West Yorkshire Police. There is extensive campaigns from op support in schools. Our schools officers do that information as well within their POLED stuff that they talk about. So we try to cover as many topics as we can within that remit.
Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on the same theme, actually, safety and the wearing of helmets. From contacts that we've had with the police in Kirkstall, there seems to be a sense that there are youngsters out there on bikes who are aware that for safety reasons, the police won't pursue them if they're not wearing a helmet. Now, understand this totally. I mean, we don't want police sort of to be driving these kids to their death or horrible injuries and whatever. Can you see any ways through this? Any kind of strategies that will sort of actually take it on? Because it does certainly the police have a sense that a lot of the offenders know this and they're making the most of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll certainly start with a response to that, Kevin, if you want to come in afterwards. Obviously, the police are not represented here today, and to be obviously careful in terms of their responses, but there are some tactical options being developed by the police in terms of responding to this, but it requires some significant risk assessments and some highly trained police colleagues for the reasons that have been highlighted there, really around safety to the riders and just as importantly, safety to other highway users. So there are some options that the police colleagues have developed there. Our focus is around prevention, early intervention and education. That we think is the way to go with particularly with young people, and it tends to be younger people involved in this type of activity. So as Kevin's detailed there, our focus there is around trying to engage with diversionary activities, of which there are a number across the city, with organisations who are keen to work with young people. Some young people are keener to work with community-based organisations than they are statutory services, so we'll use every opportunity to engage with them. And then when it comes down to it, we won't be afraid to use enforcement tactics if that's what's needed, because we have to keep people safe.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, can we move on to the next indicator, which is around domestic violence? Do we have any questions from members? No. On to waste and bin collections. I will start to make a list. So I'll start with Councillor Maloney, and then we'll go to Councillor Anderson and Harrington.
Just on bin collections, obviously it's looking good, it's improving. But with the 48 hours recovery, and when we get the reports on why they were missed, a lot of the times it's the vehicle obstruction. But if those vehicles are continuously parked there, the 48 hour turnover is not always possible. So I know that in my ward and a few streets, people are now moving their bins to the top of the streets, they'll get collected. But obviously there's residents that don't always have the capacity to do that. So, you know, we've helped with assisted collections, which is a good thing. But for those that don't have assisted collections, where does the sort of responsibility lie with the enforcement of getting vehicles either told to move? You know, does it come under kind of the bin men trying to do their best to get them round, or is it the police, or is it enforcement? Just a bit of clarity really on, you know, we can keep saying keep them out for the 48 hours, but if the vehicles just aren't moving and residents don't have the ability to actually move their bin around that vehicle, you know, what can we do about that?
Mr. Wilmer.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, it's an issue that we've discussed a number of times over the years at this Scrutiny Board, and we've brought forward some improvements to recommendations in the past inquiries. The long and short of it is very difficult. We'll always face some streets where there's a persistent difficulty caused for exactly the reason you explain. We've done work in the past to work with highways colleagues at an experimental TRO, which has worked reasonably successfully where that's been put in place, but it's not a guaranteed solution. And one of the reasons for that TRO was that hopefully deters people from parking where they're causing the most obstructions, which can often be on the corners of streets, which makes it more difficult for our large wagons to manoeuvre into and out of those streets safely. And the reason for that is that then also allows us to then enforce. So answering that part of your question, our colleagues in parking services can enforce where there's yellow lines much more easily. Where there's no yellow lines, we don't have that power as a council as such to do the enforcements. That would have to pass to the police as the agency that will be able to enforce that. But obviously, in terms of the police priorities and resources in an area, that's they've got to balance that with everything else they're doing in the areas. But we do get assistance from the police and cooperation with the police in a number of instances. I'm grateful for that. So that's where the sort of division of responsibilities lies. Yellow lines, council. Without a yellow line, if it is enforceable, it's not always enforceable, but if it is enforceable, it will be the police. Aside from that, the only other things we do is where we do have persistent, regular locations where this is happening. We do write to residents, obviously, and try and use that way of persuasion, explaining what the issue is and why it's causing a problem, and that's one of the reasons for the bins not being collected. So we do that, and we have often worked with local councillors around that as well. And in some occasions, board members have actually written using their ability to do that to residents to try and help. And that's obviously really appreciated by ourselves. But other than that, it's really difficult. But the only other solution that we can propose is trying to move those streets to a smaller vehicle, what we call a hard to access vehicle. But we've got a very limited capacity of those across the city at the moment, and the routes that they've designed for those vehicles are full. But that is one of the things that we're putting into the route review, into trying to increase some capacity around to get some smaller vehicles. But that is a cost issue as well. It's quite simple maths, really. If you've got smaller vehicles, you're not going to be able to collect as many bins a day. Therefore, you need more vehicles, more crews, and more cost. But it is something we are trying to build in.
Can I just clarify as well? And Councillor Anderson will be able to corroborate when he comes in next. In January, didn't you say there was a programme of replacement of in-cab technology where you might be able to take photographs of offending vehicles or overhanging branches that are mentioned in reports so that action can be taken directly as opposed to in a diffused manner for residents? I'll pass over to Councillor Anderson though as well before you come back on that.
That does cover one of the things, but the issues I've got is if you look at the end of day report, it's the same wards and the same streets within wards. Doesn't matter whether it's mine or whether it's in Armley, it's the same ones every time. So why are we not preempting it before it even go out? I can tell you now which ones in my ward will fail this week, and I can also tell you the excuses that the crew are going to come up with. So if I know, surely the service should know. So that's on that one. Do we not need to start getting more cross-partnership working? Because the police tell me they never get any notification from the crews to say that the vehicle that's causing the obstruction, so they can't do anything about it. The same with nobody then reports necessarily to environmental enforcement, so they can then get the trees cut back, or our own forestry people. We don't seem to have cross-partnership working. Is there anything more we can do about that? And also, what are we going to start doing about crews that do not report that bins are missed? And you only find out when people like me tell you that they're missed. Otherwise, as far as you're concerned, that crew has done their job and there's no problems. And then you'll come back to me and you'll say, well, sorry, councillor, we weren't aware. We've now checked out, and yes, you are correct, it is missed. Well, that's happening more and more and more. And also some of the reasons that we're getting. For example, those of you who know my ward, there was a reason given that they couldn't collect on Leeds Road in the middle of Bramhope because of a parked vehicle. Well, anybody who delivers those down there, you can get 2 buses down there. How our vehicle couldn't get down. So the reasons that they're given when you investigate don't actually hold much water, and we seem to be taking at face value on them. And the final point, as you're aware, because I do keep asking you about it, why do we not get feedback as to why? We get an email saying it's been passed to the team leader. The next thing we know is we don't always get, I usually have to chase up, and then I get told, oh, well, that was actually collected a fortnight ago, councillor. 1, you didn't tell me that it had been collected, and 2, you don't tell me why the problem occurred and what was actually done to resolve it for the future. Now, it can't just be my ward. that's got this issue. So what are we doing to work with ward members to keep them more fully informed in order so that we can let our residents know? Because our residents, recently, we've had the warmer weather, which means that bins that haven't been emptied are stinking by the time they're being collected. And it's not good for the crews, to be quite frank, lifting bin lids when they've got all sorts of gunk being left in it and stinking. And why should they have to go through inhumane conditions? So I do think we need to look at all of these issues, particularly working with the police to get the vehicles moved, telling them in advance. I asked, for example, as everybody, well, some people are aware, that the Hope Deals causes a problem. Well, I said, why don't you tell the police what time you're going up? And the police can go up at the same time as the crew's going to go up. Oh, we can't do that, councillor, because we don't know. Well, surely the charge hand must have a good idea when they're expecting to take their vehicle into a particular area. So at least the police, if they are available, can then turn up and try and help on the time. It just seems as though we are not working cross-partner and we're not working with ward members to try and resolve the problems that we've got.
Over to you, Mr. Woolmer.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Anderson. Quite a lot of issues there raised. I'll try and answer as many of those as I possibly can. I was struggling to write them all down as you were telling me them. In terms of the photographs and the technology, Chair, that you raised in particular, of course, you're right that we've highlighted that that's one of our actions to try and improve issues such as this, and there's the capability in the new in-cab technology to take it's a bit like a tablet. You can take it off the front of the vehicle and go and take a photograph. And we're working with some crews on that in terms of the issues that does create in terms of crew safety as well. So if you can imagine a driver or a loader decides to go and take a photograph of a vehicle in the street where perhaps there's already heightened tensions around that particular vehicle and arguments in the street, we've got to be very mindful of that in terms of requiring crews to do that. So I think it has to be something we need to work through carefully with them, and probably needs to be something that we couldn't require them to do, but just ask them to do where they feel safe to do that. So we're working through that at the moment and looking at the technology. We haven't completely finished that phase yet of all vehicles having this new upgrade. We've got some good news from the IDS recently there. We've got the funding approved for that, and we're on with the second phase of that. So I'm quite happy to come back with further information on that to the board, perhaps at a later date, at one of the meetings around how that's going. Then try and pick in your points, Councillor Anderson. I think the general point you're making is around end of day reports. Same street, same properties. Why aren't we being proactive? Those sort of general points, and then what are we doing in terms of our work with other services as well? So, again, this is something that the Scrutiny Board has raised over a number of years, and we've had one or two inquiries covering. And I would argue that in terms of the end of day reporting, it's more reliable than it's been. And as you know, Councillor Anderson, I never would say that it's perfect and it still needs to improve more, but I think it has improved in terms of reliability and the quality of information that's provided over the years. In fact, that probably leads, therefore, more frustration because the same streets, therefore, are coming up time and time again, it would appear. Just to try and reassure you around some of that. So we do work proactively behind the scenes when, for example, around the enforcement of trees. So when the button is pressed and the report is made by a crew that there is a tree obstruction, sometimes that's done proactively and the bins are still being collected. So it's just like a warning that the trees are getting there. They don't just suddenly become an obstruction. And that is automatically emailed through to Clean Neighbourhoods team who pick that up and liaise with parks, or whether, depending on the tree's location, whether it's in a private property on council land. So that work is done behind the scenes automatically from the reporting through of the issue. But of course, a tree won't just the next day or the next week suddenly be cut back and be not an obstruction. It takes time to do that in terms of parks actions or enforcement against the particular private property the tree might be coming from. And similarly, although I accept the fact that perhaps we could do more to
coordinate with the police around instances of parking that cause obstructions that we can't deal with, and some proactive work that does happen in some places where we do have a relationship with the police, and sometimes through help of by the local council, such as Council Anderson, in facilitating that happening. But ultimately, the two things really ultimately does come down to local resources and priorities for the police to help in such an issue, and also just because the crews have taken a photograph of a car in a particular place doesn't necessarily mean the police are going to be able to do something to prosecute or enforce against that. But I do take that point that, you know, we need to redouble our efforts around that. What do we do or not do about crews that don't report issues through? Again, I'd just like to reassure the board that we do take action, and it's both supportive and ultimately through other processes with crews. There's a further complexity with instances that you will see of repeat misses, that it might not always be the same crew. So it might appear to you it's the same crew every time that seems to be the problem. Well, there are two crews generally on each other shifts covering the same route, and then when that person's off, when one of those drivers is off, another driver might be covering it. So it's not always the case that 3 or 4 successive misses might be the same charge hand that's at fault. So there might be 3 or 4 different conversations need to happen with different charge hands around that. And it's not always their fault. You know, there might be a genuine reason why it wasn't recorded, the information technology hasn't worked for some reason. But I want to reassure members that we do have those conversations, those supportive conversations, initially with the charge hands who are in charge of the route. So is that an issue to do with training, to do with in-cab technology? Are they unsure about how to use it? They're nervous about it. Is there a reliability issue to do with it? What's stopping them doing it? But then we do make it clear that it's a requirement of the job. And ultimately, once we've gone through a supportive conversation or two and a warning or two, we will take it further where we need to do. But it's very rare that we actually get to that position where, after those sort of stages that I've talked about, it is an issue where the charge hand is just flatly refusing or not doing it. That's extremely rare. But we would take action, and I just want to show the board around that. I think that covers most of the issues. It probably won't be everything, Councillor Anderson.
I shall bring in Councillor Harrington then, because she's been very patient.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, John, we have spoken about some of these issues. One of the main things that my concern is is that the 48-hour sort of leeway that we have for collecting bins is all well and good, but the public don't know about that. So what steps can be taken to actually make it clearer to residents that although there is a day, it's actually a suggested day for collections, and that the 48-hour rule is there. If we are going to continue to abide by that 48-hour rule, then we need to make people aware that that's what the situation is. Because when you go on to report it online, sometimes it'll pop up and say, well, wait for 48 hours and then report it on the system. So that people are ringing me on a daily basis saying, my bin didn't get collected this morning, councillor, what are you going to do about it? So we need to be much clearer with the public about what the actual process is for reporting. And also you referred to the review of bin collection routes for the black and greens. Could you please update us on when that is going to actually happen and when people are going to be advised of that? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harrington. Yes, both those things in turn. So I'll start with the review update. The review, we're at the point now of having consulted with more members late last year and with staff the first part of this year. We've done the technical work now, or just completing the technical work now to create the routes. So at the point in the next few weeks where we'll be arranging meetings with members, all 99 members will be inviting to meet with ourselves on a ward basis if they wish to, or we'll just send the route maps, the draft route maps out to them directly and take questions however's convenient to board members. So in the next few weeks, expect an invitation, all 99 councillors, to meet with ourselves. And then, as I say, we'll provide maps, those maps in terms of the first drafts of each of the day's collections of the routes in whatever format is convenient to the councillor. So we'll leave that for you to tell us how you'd prefer that, electronically, dropping it somewhere, physically collecting it, sitting down with us. So we'll offer that to all 99 councillors on a ward basis in the next few weeks. Once we've completed that process, there'll be no doubt some changes to make. That's the reason for the consultation. And then we'll have the final versions of the maps, which we'll share for information at that stage, and we'll announce when we're going to actually introduce the new routes. It wouldn't be something we'd want to do anyway. I'm sure you'd agree with us. We wouldn't anyway into the timeline be able to, but we wouldn't want to do it in summer anyway. Summer's traditionally a very difficult time in terms of getting all the routes out, and not a good time to be making changes to routes. There will never be a good time to do it because it's going to be a very difficult process and will involve us writing to all the households across the city, informing them of their new collection date, because the majority of households will have a new collection date. So it's a very sort of important process and clear process, and one that we'll be obviously trying to seek your members' help and support with in terms of the comms. So probably sometime in autumn, late autumn, is when we're looking at implementing it. We obviously don't want to leave it too near to Christmas for obvious reasons. And then the other point was around bins and, remind me, Councillor Orrington.
It was about the 48-hour collection thing.
Yeah, and I'll absolutely. And we did have the discussion last week or so about that. And yes, anything we can do to get that message across to residents, the better. What we do, obviously, is in terms of the council's website, it's clear enough on there. It says what to do. It's got a facility to report a missed bin. If the missed bin is reported or attempted to be reported by somebody, and the in-cab technology has been used and the crew have reported the reason that why it's been missed, it will tell them that when they try to report it as a missed bin, and that's when they'll get the message to say leave it out for 48 hours. We're aware of it for this reason. So in terms of anyone that does go online to report something, they will get that message. And if they phoned up the contact centre again, they would get that verbal message from the script. Other than that, we always use the opportunity whenever we do write to residents, which is usually around Christmas time, or if there's something particularly happened that we need to put some press release around, so snow weather or something like that that's affected collections, we do try and repeat that message around. If we don't collect it on the scheduled day, please leave it out for up to 2 days. Other than that, it's very difficult to sort of think about what more we could do. We could do some publicity drive around that, if that's a suggestion, and more than happy to look at that to make that more widely known. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seary.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got a few points to pick up. Going back to the images that Councillor Barry Anderson, don't all the wagons have CCTV? Could images not be taken from there for any cars and things like that? The 48-hour ruling, so fair enough, yeah, but it's a 48-hour ruling, but we tend to like pick up the missed bins 2 or 3 days later instead of saying, right, we'll pick them up first, and then if there's any rollover, it's the next, so we're picking them up, continually in like the right order. Communication, it's poor communication from the centre. We report, we don't get replies from area or team leaders. I've been chasing an issue for over 3 months now, and basically I found out this week that they're setting up a collection point, which they could have done 3 months ago, but for 3 months now these bins are being missed. And we've had to change a route in our ward this week. It was done on the website. We've not been informed, but then they missed the day that should have collected. Yeah, some really simple things. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Seary. 2 or 3 points there to respond to. Absolutely, you're right. Of course, the most of the vehicles will have CCTV on them, and where we can use those, we do use those, but that's mainly for disputes around accidents, claims against us, behaviours of staff, etc. And that's what they're mainly used for, and also sometimes to check whether a report of a missed collection is actually true, and what's actually happened, and what our crews have done. Theoretically, we could use that CCTV as well to try and look at to see whether it's captured the particular vehicle that's caused the obstruction. In most cases, it probably wouldn't do, both in terms of the quality of the CCTV to provide that sort of level of detail of registration plate, but also because a lot of the time it'll be a vehicle approaching a junction and seeing that it can't go up a street. So it's looking sort of down the street to say, right, well, I can't get down that street. There's no point in starting to go down. I'm going to get stuck. There's going to be cars behind me, start to accumulate, so we can't go down that street. But certainly where I talked about the occasions when it's street corners that are blocked. Again, we could look at that, and I'll certainly ask the question back at the office around the quality of CCTV and that if we could use that more. But it still then comes back to we're capturing that information, who are we going to send that to, and who's actually going to take action that can be enforceable against that particular person that's part of that car. But it's something we'll look at, Councillor Searing. Thanks for raising that. In terms of the time scale to recover missed bins over 48 hours, we do plan wherever we can to recover it within a day, really. Never mind the 48 hours. And to do that, we do at the moment still try and crew up an extra 2 wagons a day to do recovery work. It's something we don't want to do forever. When the route review is implemented, that should deal with a lot of issues that mitigate against having to do so many backups. But as happened a couple of days this week, and certainly happened last week, when you have overnight sickness, absences phoned through, what will need to give will be those 2 backup routes. So that's 6 staff. So you can suddenly, if you're 2 drivers short overnight due to sickness, that's your backup's gone. So that planned recovery for that next day of a number of fails from the previous day then gets struggled to be done. So that's sometimes why it goes into the 3 days. But I can't statistically prove this, and I'll look at how we could. But anecdotally, I would say that the majority of misses that are reported on the end of the day, the vast majority of those are covered the next day or the day after. I think the issue tends to be the ones, like I think if I refer to Council and others have, where we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know, and we'll find out until 2 or 3 days. So therefore, it is of course more than 2 or 3 days after. I think we're in total agreement about that. I take the point about poor comms back to yourself and the specific example you give. I've noted a couple of emails that yourself and Councillor Dawn Collins have sent in the last week and copied me in. So I just want to reassure you that when I do get copied into those, I do chase them up in the background. And I accept that in a couple of the points you've made that we haven't responded in the speed we should have done, and I apologise for that.
Okay, Councillor Stables.
In Wetherby Ward, there are quite a few houses that have got larger than average gardens, and in the past they have been given 2 brown bins in order to cope with the amount of brown bin waste. Over the last 6 months or so, there have been several occasions where only 1 of the brown bins have been emptied. Is this policy? Is this a crew deciding not to do it? And if it is policy, why haven't the residents been informed that this is the case?
Thanks, Councillor. It's just something we've covered previously. Obviously, you won't know, but something we've covered previously in scrutiny and provided response on this and to other individual councillors as they've come to me. So the policy has always been that there's 1 brown bin per household. It always has been the policy for collection of garden waste. The garden waste service was introduced a few years ago to help those residents that do have gardens. It's not meant or designed to deal with all their garden waste. Residents should compost, should deal with their waste in a responsible way, or reduce, for example, the mowing. And we provide that service as a kind of top up, and it was designed to take out some of the pressure from the black bins. So the garden waste that was going in the black bins, it was to try and reduce that. So rather than just burn it, we'd compost it. So that always has been the case. I think what's happened over the years is, however people have managed to do it, a number of people have managed to get 2 or 3 or 4 brown bins, however they managed to do that. But that's never been something that we've said that we would do and collect. Probably a couple of years ago, certainly I think it was during the COVID period, we said, look, we're going to, and because routes were failing, members were saying that we're not getting around the full route, and saying because there's so many people who've got extra bins, we had a bit of a clamp down on that a couple of years ago. So you're probably suffering from that that clamp down that's now reaching last 6 months, so perhaps a particular route, and it might be that route that's the crew's thinking, look, we're getting criticised here for not completing it every day, and one of the reasons we are is because people are putting more than one bin out. So while we continue to offer free garden waste service, then it will be just one bin.
In which case, is it possible to communicate that, because people don't know that?
It's difficult to communicate into, because it is on the website, it's online, and you're only allowed one bin. And if people choose to try and find out what the policy is, they'll find out. It's difficult for us to proactively go out and communicate. What should happen though is, and I'll check this, is where a bin is being left, they should be putting a sticker on the bin to tell them that there's only one bin collected. And so I'll look at, make sure that if that's not happening, why that's not happening. And we are reviewing the bin stickers at the moment to make sure they are also giving the right information. So it's all right just saying your bin hasn't been collected, or why, and referring them, whether it's through QR code or whatever, to well, this is why.
I think that'll be really helpful. Thank you.
It's just to remind members that we are also going to be taking a deep dive into the waste strategy in July. So some of this questioning can be repeated again. I'm going to move on into the recycling area. I appreciate, because we've touched on brown bins, we're moving to recycling. I am aware that I have got 2 requests to speak though, which will involve some mention of bins in that. But for other members, please be aware we're moving into recycling now if you want to indicate to speak. So Councillor Siri and Councillor Anderson.
Just got a real quick one about brown bins. So neighbours bring the brown bins out, they put them together to help the team, but the loaders go, there's 2 bins there. We've seen quite a bit of that. So I'm having to tell residents now to split the bins, which is creating more work for your team. All right.
Yeah, thanks for making me aware of that. But obviously that's wrong, what's happening. And my advice to the residents would be as well, if they can, mark, if they haven't already, mark the house numbers on, so it's clear it's 19 and 20 or 9 and 21. Yeah.
But we've got a problem now in terms of the way when bins are missed. We tell residents that they can go and take the brown bin excess to a household waste site, various other things. But that's contrary to the council's policies on climate emergency. How you're expecting people to use their car for a short journey is not environmentally sustainable. Whereas, is it, so the question I'm asking, maybe not to be answered today, is maybe we need to look at which is best for the environment, that we actually collect more than one brown bin and reduce down the number of short journeys, or whether it is best to remain. Now, I accept that will come at a cost to you, and I'm not disputing that, because the more that you do, but if we're trying to reduce down the reliance on cars, and people should be using less cars and maybe not even owning them, the 2 policies are not in compliance with each other, and you need to look at how you're making a decision on that. What's the best way of that balance? Because you're arguing against yourself on a number of occasions. Thanks.
I see that Councillor Rafiq is keen to come in on that point.
Thanks, Chair. Well, first of all, I just want to reiterate that, even though we collect one bin, and it should be one bin, but we do provide one of the biggest and free brown garden waste service across the UK. I say across the UK, and I do, say this with, with facts. With regard to, it's a very good point about, well, do you actually, from an environmental point of view, do you make the journey, or do you actually, the residents do have an option of actually home composting as well as obviously those who can't can make that journey. We've got 8 household recycling centres across the city. So in most cases, I don't think where people have to go, and if they've got large gardens, then, they don't have to travel to the other side of the city as well. But I'm not encouraging at the same time that people should do that. That should be as a last resort if you can't compost at home. But everybody has a fortnightly, a free garden waste collection in the city, which is 1 bin per household.
Very quickly, Councillor Anderson.
it's the short journeys that are the worst for environmental. If they were having to travel to the other side of the city, it would actually probably be less damaging. It's the fact that it's short journeys, so you no sooner get your car engine turned on, you get it going to a reason. Most people's cars just watch their temperature hasn't reached the optimum temperature. It's stopping, it's starting again. That's the environmental impact, is the short journeys, not necessarily the longer journeys. I don't disagree with what you said, Councillor Feek. I'm not criticising what you said. I'm just saying we need to be aware that yes, you've got local ones, but it's the short journeys that are actually the environmental problem, not the long journeys.
I think you've made your point, Councillor Anderson. Can I bring in some other members now, please? Councillor Hannan and then Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair. A question for John. As you know, Headingley High Park is a unique ward when it comes to student changeover, and that's going to impact us from next week. And I know there's been extensive discussions with other partners, for instance, the university, Unipol, and other organisations that are going to help us out. I'm really keen to look at the plans that you've discussed, and I'm really impressed with that. But what I'd like to know is the figures that's going to come out after the student changeover, and how has that changed from previous years? Because I'm really interested to know that the plans that you've got in place this year will hopefully improve recycling and student waste being properly managed. So can that be an action for you to give us in the next meeting going forward?
Through the chair, it's certainly something we can talk to at a local level around with ward members around, and we would expect to do that, provide you with the data around what we collect. It's slightly nuanced and difficult by the fact that some of the waste we won't see, and by encouraging people to recycle and reuse more, it's a bit like when we move on to the one of the indicators we're proposing around reuse, is that we don't capture that information ourselves, because it's the reuse is done through charities and through other people. The easiest way we can measure it from what we do is, are we actually having to collect less ourselves? So therefore, something else must be happening different to the other stuff. So we will certainly be able to provide information around the tonnages and the time and efforts that we put in as a council to collect waste, and then we'll be reliant on the other partners that are doing the work to collect the reuse around how they measure that. But certainly that's something we'd want to discuss. We are putting, as you know, a lot of resources in as a group. Which is quite a sophisticated plan they've been developed over the years, aside from the work with the universities and other partners around putting extra refuse resource in for those 2 weeks, and Clean and Neighbours team, and more enforcement resource this time than we put in before, particularly to look at the scavengers, if you like, of people who are going around and emptying bins and bags and things, because that's a real problem in the area.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, are you wanting to...
Yes, sorry. Just to add, I know British Heart Foundation are involved with the charity aspect, so it might be worth also getting that data and incorporating it with your data. Then at least shows that we're supporting charities also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just comment. I'm quite intrigued with this conversation, what's going on, especially where some properties have 2 bins and think that they should have 2 brown bins. Because in my ward, we have areas where they're told they're not entitled to brown bins, and they have front and back gardens, which are not small either. And they're told, and I've got the emails with them on to Councillor Rafiq, you said that everybody's entitled to one. So I'll send you these emails, because it's made quite clear that they're not entitled to a brown bin, certain areas. I just want to comment that. Thank you.
Well, hopefully we'll have clarity on that when we have this waste strategy and the obligations and expectations people can have on their household waste. So anything else on recycling rates from members? I have one question myself, if you don't mind. The council, in its information it's provided, has pointed out how it's doing very well in the league table of not putting waste into landfill, and that we're apparently the 27th best in the country. However, when it comes to our overall recycling rate, we haven't put any comparative data in. Can you let us know where we rank in the list of local authorities for our recycling rate?
Thanks, Chair. I can't off the top of my head in terms of nationally, and I'll get that information and share that with yourself through yourself. In terms of core cities, we're about mid-table in terms of performance of core cities, in terms of recycling rates. I think the point why we brought forward the information around what happens to the rest of it was in response to discussions here at Scrutiny, where that was actually raised and as something that you'd like to understand what happens to the rest of it and how much actually goes to landfill. But yeah, absolutely, we're about mid-table, but I'll get the information nationally as well to yourself, Chair.
Can I also clarify the glass collection trials? Will that be included in the report that comes to the July meeting?
Yes.
Councillor Rafiq.
The recycling rate, overall recycling rate. I think there are a couple of Bristol and maybe one of the city kind of boroughs. The others are way ahead of them. And just to let you know that we are the second largest council in the country, obviously with a lot of the inner city areas with back-to-back houses, through terrace houses. It presents challenges, densely populated areas. And one of the biggest comparison is Birmingham. And I know Birmingham's, from their own account, is their recycling rate is just over 20%. And something I'm talking to my counterpart in Birmingham, they're quite keen to come and talk to us and make a journey to see what we're doing right. So just to give an example of where we are with one of our kind of, from a core city point of view, one of our key counterparts.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq. Councillor Stables.
This is a query that my understanding is that we have to keep the RRFs, but you might have covered this previously, but you have to keep the RRFs working and we don't want them ever to switch off. So I've been told, so I just want to clarify this, if this is true or not, that when we're short of black bin waste, that we actually burn green bin waste to keep them burning because it's not financially viable to allow those RRFs to the incinerator to stop burning.
I can absolutely categorically 100% say that is not true.
Well, it's always nice to get some clarification at a scrutiny board. Now, there are future reporting proposals. I hope members have seen in the papers the tables that have been produced, which are what's the word? Innovative in terms of how we present our statistics. Did members feel that they were useful and should be incorporated into future reports? And do you have any comments on the data which was presented in those tables?
Page 59.
Page 59, if that's helpful. Mr. Woolmer.
Sorry, Ted, just on that questioning of what's useful to put in the report. The previous recycling table, you talked about comparative information. Would it be useful to put the core city table as standard in that section then? Is that?
Well, I think it's always useful to have comparators with, our partner cities. Sorry, it's page 63. Just in case you're flicking. I assume that's indicating that there are no questions as opposed to just being simply engrossed in the information. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Fine with the information. It just occurred to me that it might be easier to make sense of this if it were in a pie chart. But I'm impressed with the categorization and the way it's been broken down.
Are we precious about the format? No.
No. Yeah.
Very good.
Whatever scrutiny wants.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like our performance report scrutiny is at an end. So many thanks for officers and executive members for being here to provide further detail to the raw statistics. We're now going to move into the next item on the agenda, which is about sources of work. And to enable us in our discussions about what we might wish to look at over the coming year, it would be useful, I think, if exec members and officers did remain just for a little while we go through that discussion. So I open up to colleagues in terms of areas that they might wish to indicate for investigation. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Tagging is a big issue across the city, and unfortunately Headingley High Park is a tagging place where everybody thinks that that's the appropriate place to go do tagging. We know people come from all directions of the country to come and spoil the community, and it's putting a blight on the neighbourhood as if it's a norm. So what I'm proposing is if we could look at reviewing our anti-graffiti strategy in the coming weeks and months, in terms of what's working and what's not working, and how can we make it work for us going forward, because I have a lot of local residents that have been affected by it mentally now because they feel that it's affecting their well-being, and it's something that I'm really keen to work on very closely and going forward. Any suggestions on how we can carry this review out? I think it's very important now, and it's not getting any better, but it's just getting worse.
Mr. Money, I appreciate that we are going to have a crime update in September. Could we have some further information for that meeting to enable us to decide whether we want to do a full-blown inquiry?
Yeah, that'd be fine. And in the meantime, perhaps we can pick up on a ward basis. A number of wards suffer from this particular issue more than others. There is a partnership in place involving our colleagues in Leeds Watch, LASBA, and of course John's resources. So we could maybe in the meantime pick up a local conversation. Councillor McCluskey.
I just wanted to second that. Farnley and Wortley's had a real spate of tagging, and in areas like parks on private property, it really does bring the area down. So.
Councillor Seary.
Sorry, we're seeing a big increase as well in the Pudgy ward. So I don't think it's just isolated, it's across the city.
Councillor Rowntree.
Ditto from me. I represent the ward adjacent to Councillor Hannan's here, and yeah, I'd strongly support us doing a big piece of work on tagging.
Councillor Graham, and then Councillor Stables and Harrington. Oh.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that in our ward we have areas that suffer a lot with graffiti repeated, so I support that.
Just to say that it was not something in Boston Spa that you would expect to see, and we haven't seen it until recently. And in the last probably over the last month, it's appeared and it's spread very, very quickly.
Well, it's a salient phenomenon, which we can, if any information could be given prior to September, then that would, I think, be useful for members. Yeah. Any other lines of inquiry that people are thinking we might want to put some focus on? Councillor Stables.
Yes, so this has come from my colleague, and it's about trying to not prevent gatherings in parks, but actually to formalise them in some way so that there is some accountability, so that somebody is accountable for that gathering so it doesn't get out of hand, and so that the police are aware of it as well. So if there's going to be a large gathering, is this right? This would be in the right format to say this here? Yes, it is. So this is in a situation where there may be 100 people that gather for a particular reason in a park, and currently that's able to happen, which can be very intimidating for local people. and cause a lot of fear and anxiety, but also potentially people are worried about where it's leading to and what could happen at the, at the end of that gathering. Is it a peaceful gathering? What's it for? So the proposal was to look at some ways of, if you're going to have a large gathering, of having to apply to somewhere for that, and so that somebody is accountable, and so that police know, or a local person knows who they should contact if there are any issues, and it will just make them more accountable, the groups more accountable. Is that something that we can discuss?
I think it's something that we can interrogate and see whether it needs to form into an inquiry, or whether it's just something that could be initiated through this body to get a decent enough response from the authorities. Happy to pursue that. Anything from the officers on that? No. Okay. Councillor Harrington.
It kind of links to what Councillor Staples has just been saying, but issues with the larger parks where we do hold large events, and the issues that we're having across the city with visitors who we would prefer didn't visit our parks and then leave a lot of mess afterwards. What can we do to actually look at how we manage those areas better?
Okay, I think we're getting a theme developing here around public open space, and I know that the council, for instance, are starting a programme of developing development plans for each of our community parks, and it might be a good point for us to maybe add value to that process by offering some oversight as a body. So that's something that I can take up and see if they're amenable to our help. And it could cover other areas as well in terms of environmental areas. There was a suggestion as well that we might wish to look at the efficacy of the relaxed mowing policies in terms of their ability to deliver environmental benefits. Is that something that members might be interested in having a look at? I think that could be quite a succinct query area. Yeah. Councillor Rafiq.
2 points. One is about looking after our parks, things like litter, barbecues, all that. I'm happy for Scrutiny to look into that. I think we already do in terms of empty the litter bins, doing up the picking up the litter on some of our major parks on a daily basis. But if we any work we could do to kind of entice people to take away their litter, put the litter into the bins, how we work jointly is appreciated. But it is about people taking ownership and treating their parks as their own kind of space. It's not, it's a public park. It's not council park. So, yeah, happy for Scrutiny look into that, Chair. With regards to relaxed mowing, I'm happy, for Scrutiny against input. It's a very emotive and difficult issue because I've just taken over the portfolio, and you get two sort of sides to it. I get a lot of people saying, why we haven't cut the grass? I'm already getting those. And then those who want to be relaxed. So how do you balance that? It's a very difficult act to do. And it's like in some kind of same areas. So it is, again, I'm happy for Scrutiny to kind of have a look into it, have a say. Thank you.
Councillor McCluskey.
The two most common issues I get in my casework is mowing and tree management. And it seems to be an issue for people.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, just a suggestion, Chair, for your consideration. in the end of 21, we agreed a 10-year parks and green spaces strategy, which Scrutiny Board were involved in developing and creating. Might be in your work programme, you want to ask for an update in terms of progression in delivering that strategy, and you can incorporate this sort of discussion and debate within that.
I'm just being told by those who know better than me, there is something in the schedule for February which could be brought forward where that could be that discussion could be incorporated. Any other suggestions from members? Councillor Maloney.
I know that we'll have a crime update. Did you say November? Is that when we'll get it? Whenever that is. But if we could look at, it was spoken about last year, the sort of pathways on the very edge of the city centre that go obviously into our sort of communities. Seem to be sort of dark spots for especially women and girls walking home. So like me, walking from the Civic just to the very edge of the city centre where I live isn't in the dark always the, you know, most comfortable of things to do. So I think our city centre safety is very good, but it's then when we spread it out, just that very outer ring of the city centre and getting home safely would be just some updates on how sort of the work on that's going.
Well, I think it's very salient because the Mayor of West Yorkshire also invested in a research project, did she not, which involved the involvement of women and girls in Leeds around that and their safety in parks. So I think the two could be incorporated into the same inquiry, couldn't they? Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, just as women and girls' safety has been raised in the city centre, there is currently a survey that I'm happy to forward the details of to Scrutiny to share with your members so that you may be able to take part in that survey for women and girls to take part in and say the areas that they don't feel safe and make some points on that survey. It's being carried out. Currently, I think there's another 2 weeks left where the survey is open. So, you know, I'm happy to share that with Scrutiny and you can fill that in and hopefully then those areas will get addressed through that survey.
Well, I think that's been a really helpful discussion. I am aware. I have been on some, what's it called? What's the organisation where we had our training? The Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. Yes, I went to get some training because I know you'll keep me on my toes, but I wanted to make sure I had the national guidance as well around scrutiny. And one of the things that they were keen to emphasise is that when we do scrutiny, we should, wherever possible, try and involve the wider public as well in our discussions. And I think that members have chosen some very significant areas which are not just exercising councillors in terms of the concerns, but also the wider population, where I think we might be able to get some wider interaction involved if we did choose it as a line of inquiry. So I think that's been a very helpful discussion. And I appreciate our executive members and officers staying behind to enable us to come to conclusions. So we'll have a few things to work upon there. If people are inspired outside of the meeting, please do get in touch with me and Becky anyway with any ideas, and we'll see what we can do about discussing that in future meetings. What else have we got to do in the formal areas of work, Becky?
It's just a matter of noting the current work current work schedule as the basis for sort of developing that work, but otherwise all done, Councillor.
Are we happy to note the work schedule? No comments at this stage. I will therefore declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for your attendance and your participation and making my first meeting a pleasure. Thank you.